This is Dimensions in Parapsychology, and I'm Bryce Baum. My co-hostess today, Zulma Rayo, is still in Argentina. Our guest is a most unusual man. Now, some call him a prophet, a philosopher, or a cosmic prankster. He has great courage in what he says, and you may not agree with it. He indicates that mind is a myth. His name is U.G. Krishnamurti, no relation to J. Krishnamurti. U.G. creates an atmosphere of what we like to call mental aerobics. He's got your mind dancing. He provokes anger, frustration, challenge. Some say he's either a madman or a genius. Well, let's meet our guest, U.G. Krishnamurti. This is the book. It's called The Mystique of Enlightenment. It was written by Alvin J. Bobroff. It's a fantastic book, and at the end of the program, we're going to give you the telephone number and where you can get this book. It's all about our guest today, U.G. Krishnamurti. U.G., I want to welcome you to the program. I know you're a very controversial man, and because you mentioned at one time that mind is a myth.
Yes.
And a lot of people refuse to accept that.
Because it undermines the whole foundation of human thought, which is built on that presumed, assumed, accepted foundation. You see, so they are not ready to accept that. But I don't care whether they accept it or not. I'm not trying to win them over to the point of view that there is no such thing as mind, let alone, you see, changing the mind or bring about a change in the mind or a mutation of mind and so on and so forth. So what I'm interested in is to emphasize what I have discovered for myself and by myself. And
okay, what I'd like to do is go back and begin at the beginning of this discovery.
Yeah.
We'd like to make mention that U.G. Krishnamurti is not related to J. Krishnamurti.
Yeah.
And around 49 years of age, he was living a fairly normal life in India, came from good parents in India, and something happened. A biological process within his body began to take place, did it not?
Yes, it did, but you see, in my enthusiasm at the very beginning, when I did not know what was happening to me, I felt that it was necessary for me to emphasize and overemphasize the physiological aspect of what they called enlightenment, but not as a psychological thing or as a religious thing. I discovered for myself, and it was a shattering blow to me, that there is no religious content at all in what I stumbled into, and no religious or mystical overtones or undertones. So it was something totally unrelated to what I expected would be the state of an enlightened man was like or is like or whatever the way you put it.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that enlightenment is within every man, that it happens over a period of time?
I'm questioning the very interest in enlightenment, although we have been for centuries brainwashed to believe that there have been many enlightened people, they are trying to enlighten others. Why one should be enlightened? You see, the enlightenment that we are interested in is to be like somebody else, like the spiritual teachers of mankind who talked of enlightenment and who wanted to enlighten others, you see.
Now, basically, when you had this experience, this biological experience, did that go...
I don't want to say that it is biological in contradistinction. That's a very high-sounding word. Anyway...
Well, some people would say Kundalini or...
To the accepted religious state of mind or as a religious experience. But what I was left with was nothing but the functioning of this physical organism with a tremendous energy of its own. And what we don't realize is that the energy is separate from us, that it is something that we have to bring about as a result of spiritual exercises like meditation, yoga and all that kind of a thing. But it is something extraordinary, and all forms of life are the manifestations. I don't like to use the word manifestation because it has certain peculiar connotations. It is an expression of life, I would say.
You know something, I'd hate to see you with a dictionary and see what you could do with that. You could probably change...
I don't use dictionary anymore, but we have, thank God, at our disposal.
But usually, they say, you know, the experience that you've had, it seems like a lot of other mystics have had a similar experience. They call the raising of the serpent fire, the kundalini energy and things of this nature, or cosmic consciousness.
And I think that they are all, you see, nothing but thought-induced experiences. You see, anything you experience, however extraordinary that experience may be, is a petty little experience, and it is, I would go one step ahead and say that it is nothing but a sensual experience, like any other sensual experience. All spiritual experiences I would put in the area of all the other sensual experiences.
Would you say that everyone, say, every human upon this planet eventually will have that experience?
He is already there. What he has to come to terms with, if I may put it that way, is that there is no such thing as new experience at all. And all experiences, however extraordinary they may be, they are very repetitive and they are very tiring. You see, we use tremendous amount of energy to experience the same thing over and over again. That is why we are bored, and we are looking for newer and newer types of experiences. And some of them you classify as spiritual experiences to feel superior, that spiritual experiences are accepted by our civilization or culture or whatever you want to call it as the experiences you should have, and they put them all on a higher level, and that makes us feel and look upon all the other types of experiences as something to be avoided.
Well, let me ask you this. Are you an atheist?
No, when I say that those words don't apply to me, see, because when I say and emphasize that God is irrelevant, it does not mean that I'm an atheist. I'm not even an agnostic, you see. So it is just irrelevant, you see, because I consider that God, truth, reality, enlightenment are nothing but the extensions of our pleasure movement. I'm not against pleasure at all. Whether you are an American or an Indian or a Russian or a Chinese, it really doesn't matter where you come from or to which country you belong to. The one thing that everybody is after is pleasure, and he wants that to be permanent. So all these spiritual experiences, including the demand for spiritual experiences, are nothing but an extension of your pleasure movement. So these people, religious religious teachers particularly, of the past and all those we have in our marketplace
You're
today,
speaking about the gurus, you're speaking about people like Rajneeshas and Muktanandis.
All of them are selling shoddy piece of spiritual goods, and what they are selling is nothing but a petty experiences, you see. We fall for that kind of a thing because we are interested in some kind of a comfort, and they are providing the comfort for the people.
What about the TV evangelists that are really...
They must also be put in the same category as all these gurus that the people in this country are importing from abroad, whether it is in Japan or in China or India. You see, there is a demand for that kind of a thing. It is nothing but a demand and supply, you see. You know, wherever there is a demand, there is bound to be a supply. And every time you see you are fed up with a particular teacher or a particular guru or a particular man who is selling a particular type of goodies, you are importing, you see, another kind of a guru offering exactly the same thing but slight variations.
A lot of it's called emotional escapism, where they have to run...
Yes, certainly. It's fashionable these days, you see, to talk about the gurus, you know. Some of those who come to see me say that I have a lawyer, I have a psychiatrist, I have a guru. And so naturally I ask them, what does your guru say? You see, it's considered to be a status symbol these days. I'm very surprised that Americans are also falling for that kind of a thing. That guru is included in the list of those people, like the lawyer, like the accountant, like the psychiatrist. You see, guru has become an integral part, or considered as, you see, a status symbol these days.
Well, certainly a lot of people are racing over to Pune, India, to find this chap who was over here, kicked out of the country with his 95 Rolls Royces, and he now has the entourage of medical doctors, psychiatrists. Yes. He has lawyers, attorneys, politicians, all coming to him.
Yeah, but that, you see, if one fool leaves, there are always other fools to take our place there, you see. So as long as there is a demand, so long these people stay in business. Now, I don't want to say anything against a particular teacher like Rajneesha or those who are in the marketplace selling the spiritual goodies.
Why not?
But I'm not interested because basically, essentially and fundamentally, my interest is only to emphasize that what I have come into, what I have stumbled into, and not to try to free anybody from their teachers, from their beliefs or their particular religious background. That's not my interest. It's just to focus, spotlight that what I have stumbled into is something which is extraordinary for me. Since it is not in the area of an experience, it is something that cannot be shared with anybody. And as a matter of fact, this cannot be fitted into any value system. I have no value for whatever I have stumbled into or whatever I have discovered, and it has no value for the society.
What you have stumbled into?
Yes. So it's there, you see. I don't care whether you listen to me or not, whether they reject what I am saying as absurd nonsense. It doesn't interest me. So that is why when I appear on shows like that, you see, I feel that I have really nothing to say. And it is highly presumptuous on my part to accept these invitations, but it's up to you to bring out whatever you want to bring out from this conversation,
Okay.
if you want to call it a conversation. This is something like, you say, a highly perfected instrument, you see, highly perfected instrument. It is singularly incapable of striking any false note. So if you notice any false notes here, I'm not blaming you. It's because what you are trying, you see, how you are trying to play this instrument. So I really, frankly, honestly, I have nothing to say to you or to anybody. As I said, it's highly presumptuous on my part to sit here and to carry on this dialogue or conversation with you. But the only way this can, see, if I say this can, you see, it sounds mystifying. You see, the only way any expression can be made of the way this living organism is functioning is through your medium. So whatever comes out of this is yours and not mine, and I have nothing to do with it.
But you're certainly attracting a lot of attention by what you have to say, by your philosophies, by, you know, the way you state things. It's like doing mental aerobics with people. It's like letting them do a dance with inside their mind.
It's up to them to do what they like with what I'm saying, you see. And if they repeat what I'm saying, unfortunately, they become my followers. I have no following at all, you see. People ask me why you are constantly moving. I don't want anybody to stick to me, you see, because I have nothing to offer. If they presume that they are getting something out of their contact with me or making some sense, some meaning out of what I am saying, it is their tragedy. I don't want to give any opportunity to them to make them feel.
But then why do you even come out in the public or anything? Why don't you, I mean, some people say, well, Eugene, why don't you just find a beautiful home in the wilderness and stay there and
You will be surprised, even if I run away and hide myself.
People are going to find you?
Jungle people are somehow going to find where I am and they will come there.
Now,
It's not that I have something extraordinary or anything, you see. This is something which they feel, they see, that there is something here which they think may be right.
well, you're giving us some sort of a charisma automatically.
I don't do anything. Whatever they do with what I'm saying.
By not doing is what you're giving off.
But you see, unfortunately, remaining silent is one of the traditional ways of communicating things. That's in India, you see.
It also
so if
attracts
I
attention.
don't say anything, people will still come and sit around me, and they say that they are getting something from me. I tell them, whatever you experience in my presence is your own creation, and I have no part to play in that. But still they don't believe that. You don't know what we are getting. The tremendous energy that we feel in your presence is something extraordinary. There is no point in your denying it. I deny that, and I have no part to play. I cannot take any credit for whatever experiences they experience in my presence They can go and tell others, but I'm certain. If I'm certain of anything, it is that I play no part in their experiences, which they feel in my company.
Well,
yes, sorry.
Could it be? I'm sorry. Could it be that you are a mirror reflecting back where they are?
I don't like that phrase at all. You see, they have no way of looking into this mirror. It is reflecting exactly the way the things are. You see, it is not distorting. And it may sound very strange to you. You see, I have thousands and thousands of photos sent to me. And as a rule, I reject all the photos with a smile on my face. And people tell me you are smiling all the time. How come you reject all these photos? Which we consider to be, is because when I look into a mirror, I don't smile at myself. I don't arrange my face to look beautiful, handsome, or any such thing. It's just a face there. The mirror is reflecting. So the image that is there is in the computer comes out and says, this is not it. You see, it rejects it. So to believe that they can use this as a mirror is to falsify the situation they find themselves in. You see, so I am all the time emphasizing that no useful purpose will be served by carrying on these dialogues, these conversations, these question and answer sessions, because that nothing will ever come out of this. One simple thing that I am emphasizing, focusing, spotlighting all the time is that the instrument which we use to understand anything is not the instrument. It has not helped us at all to do anything, you see, to achieve the goals that we have set before us. And there is no other instrument. That's the only instrument we have. And we have been for centuries trying to sharpen this instrument. It's an extraordinary instrument, and it is useful in certain areas where its use is absolutely essential to survive sanely and intelligently in this world. But that is not the instrument. If this is not the instrument to help us understand the living aspect of our lives, and if there is no other instrument, there is nothing to understand. So the questions which they throw at me are basically the questions for which they already have answers. So otherwise, they cannot have any questions at all.
But how would you suggest to the individual who perhaps is watching right now, how they could go inside themselves and find that answer when all the other peripheral stuff is blocking their view?
You see, we have been made to believe that there is some way you can look at yourself, you see, and look inside of yourself. So what is there to look inside of you? That is my question. I did it most of my life, you see, to look inside. And because I was made to believe being is the ending, the seeing and the seer and the seen and the perceiver, the perceived, the observer and the observed. And you see, it doesn't make any sense at all, because there is nothing there to be seen. And the seer is nothing but the knowledge we have of the things out there and the things here inside of us.
That already exist.
They are just sensations. As I said at the very beginning, this is nothing but the functioning of the living organism. And this body is not interested in anything other than responding to the stimuli. Whereas the mind is born and it sustains itself in the area of sensuality. It demands experiences. All those experiences, spiritual or otherwise, the body is not interested in them. It is rejecting them totally because it has no use for them. So what it is interested in is to respond to the stimuli. And one of the other things which I want to emphasize at the same time is that the brain does not play any part, you see, in responding to the stimuli. It plays a very insignificant part. The brain is not a container. Brain is not it's just a reactor. It is reacting to the stimuli and translating the stimuli in terms of the memory that is there. You see, you call them neurons, you call it memory, you call it by whatever name you like. And the mind can maintain its continuity only through the translation of all these sensory perceptions, the sensory activity in terms of the knowledge we have.
In other words, the memory.
In other words, memory. So, what are you? What is man? You see, I use what is man because I'm sorry, you see, I have to use that what is a woman? What is man? Man is nothing but a memory. What is it that tells you that you are the same person that you were 15 or 20 years ago? What is it that makes us feel that we are something different from the other species on this planet? What I want to tell, you see, is that we are not created, if anybody has created us, for any grander purpose other than the species we have on this planet.
In other words,
the assumption that we are superior and that we have been created by God, nature, or whatever is your fancy, tells you.
Don't we have potential?
You see, everything that is necessary is already there. Is already there. This body does not want to learn anything. It does not want to know anything. Its interest is survival and to reproduce one like this. But we don't seem to have tremendous confidence in what this body can do.
Right.
So we think that we know a lot about this body. You see, all the medical technology that has helped us to discover the functioning of this body is very, very limited. We may be proud that we have, you see, done tremendous amount of research in understanding the functioning of the body, but what we do not know is immense. So there will come a time, I tell you, that you will have to you will have to have different ways of treating the body. The right body is different from the left.
What do you mean the right body is different from the left body?
There's nothing. You see, we assume that there is a totality here. You see, every cell is an autonomous unit. You see, we assume that there is a totality of things, that the human body is, there is not even a federal structure, if I may use the political term here, you see, this body. Each cell has a memory of its own, has a tremendous intelligence of its own. So one thing that I want to emphasize is that this idea of cooperation which we have superimposed on the human thinking is false, because you have to be kind, sympathetic, nice, brotherly, loving to your neighbor. But basically, every cell is interested in one thing, its survival. Its survival depends upon its cooperation with the cell next to it. So loving thy neighbor as thyself is one of the con games that humanity has played for centuries, or I don't know how many hundreds of years.
Boy, you'll get a lot of reaction out of that one. Is it basically allowing the cells to know that we love them and we cuddle them?
The love has no place in the scheme of things there at all.
Love doesn't have any place at all.
No place in the society. Maybe, see, it is necessary to love your neighbor, but that is where we have gone wrong, because in the name of love thy neighbor as thyself, for how many millions of people, men, women, children have been massacred.
Yeah, but didn't you were married one time, didn't you love your wife?
I don't want to, it's ancient history. And
it may be ancient history, but a lot of people like to find out.
That was one of the things that made our life miserable, married life miserable, because you see, long before, Tina Turner's song, What Has Love Got to Do With It? You see, I used to tell my wife, you see, she resented that, you see. So, where is the room for love? You see, I'm infatuated with you and you are infatuated with me. And the one thing that keeps us together is the sex. You see, I don't know if it is good for your audience.
That's perfectly right. Their ears have just perked open.
Yes. But that's the only thing that keeps us together. And then she used to tell me, I said, well, why you don't try elsewhere? You see, some other woman, you see, that is a fact, you see. But I don't know. For some reason, I could not, you see. Maybe my upbringing, maybe my religious thinking, maybe I don't know, you see, but I used to talk in that strain, but I didn't have the guts, courage to try it elsewhere. And I don't want to make any confessions on this, but when I actually tried it,
they
finished. The sex finished for me. You will be surprised. The sex, one extramarital, one stand, what is that, one night stand.
One night stand?
Sex outside my marriage finished the sex for me. Because it suddenly struck me that we use the other person for our pleasure, and I have no business to use.
That's, you're true there, because a lot of people do use.
We use and they use, you see. And so the only relationship we have with the people is what do we get out of this relationship, you see. The love we talk about, you see, turns into hate when once we don't get what we want out of relationship at all.
Fascinating. You're watching Dimensions in Parapsychology. I'm Bryce Bond. My guest today is U.G. Krishnamurti. No relation to J. Krishnamurti. What do you think about your counterpart?
He has been dead for 3 years, and I don't think it is right to say anything about that man.
Okay.
Whatever he did. That's the end of it.
He was pretty well accepted. A lot of people liked him.
You see, the moment they accept what I am saying, that's the end of me.
Oh.
Yes, that's the end of me.
Okay, and I want to...
So there will arise a need for somebody else to come and blast everything that I am saying. You see, those who existed before me, whether Krishnamurti or Buddha or all those teachers, cannot touch, you see, what I am saying. You see, it's not that I feel egocentric or any such thing. When once you touch life at a point where nobody touched before, what existed in the past cannot touch this, because this is something new. It is something unique. Nobody can touch this.
Well,
but it is possible for you, if you are lucky enough to touch life at a point where nobody touched, to make this obsolete. Not those who existed before. So I'm not interested in freeing anybody from those people that existed before, and condemn the whole thing as traditional, and what I am going to say is something extraordinary, something rational, something revolutionary. To me, there is no such thing as revolution at all, because revolution is nothing but a revaluation of the value system. It may be necessary in a social structure where the revolutions have become part and parcel of the changing conditions of our living, but there is no such thing as a revolution at all.
Now this basically we could consider to be your perception of your personal reality. In other words, you're living your truth. Are you not?
You see, to me there is no such thing as truth. You see, what I say now at this moment is true and valid for me. The next moment probably you will see and you will hear altogether something quite different from what I said a while ago. So that is why I said, you see, what my interest is to see that the people do not pay any attention to what I am saying at this moment. And there is no such thing as a consistency at all. People say that you are very contradictory, you make so many statements, you contradict yourself. There is no contradiction, you see. I make one statement, the next statement contradicts, tears apart the first statement, negates the first statement. The third statement negates the first two statements. Fourth statement negates the first three statements. The fifth statement negates the sixth statement even before it is made. Not with the idea of arriving at a position, at a point to establish any truth or any such thing. So the truth is something which cannot be captured and contained and given expression to by anybody. The moment you try to put it, you see, in a structure, a thought structure, it is already dead, whether it is mine or yours. So the dead one cannot touch anything living. The moment you see the thought touches life, the whole structure of thought, whether it is yours, there is no such thing as yours or mine. I don't have any thoughts which I can call my own. Not one thought which I can call.
Then there's really nothing that anyone can say to you that will really, really honestly upset you, would they?
Upset?
Upset you, or get you upset.
Nothing, you see. No, nothing.
So they could call you everything and it wouldn't even bother you.
It doesn't bother me, not because, you see, I am impervious, you see, to, is that the word? I don't know.
That's a good word.
To what they are saying, that I ignore what they are saying. So I have a lot of opinions, from disease to divinity, you see, because I have lived 72 years, I have traveled everywhere in the world, I have met so many people. But my opinions are no more important than the opinions of that the cab driver there. You see, you may think that your opinions are something extraordinary. So I am not interested in or even trying to change the opinions of others. You see, I'm not trying to win anybody over to my point of view, because I don't have a point of view, because it's constantly changing. Yeah?
But why do you allow yourself to be pulled in for, say, books and television shows and groups of people in the first place?
Honest to God, I really don't know what is there in that book. Some people come to see for their own reasons. Nobody is asked to come, nobody is asked to go. And they ask some questions. I give what they call answers. They put them on the tape, transcribe them, publish them for their own reasons, you see. So it's not that I'm disclaiming what is there in that book. I really don't know what is in that book. Somebody put them together, somebody edited, somebody published that book.
Well, what basically it is, it's new insight, it's a new way of looking at things, it's a new stimulus, and I think that's very, very attractive.
Now, if you call that an insight, you have destroyed the whole thing, you see, because the people think that through their encounter, they get a lot of insights. I tell them, look here, all insights, however extraordinary they may be, are worthless, because that strengthens the very thing you are trying to be free from. So all insights, however extraordinary they may be, are useless, worthless.
We're going to put that briefly on hold. We're watching Dimensions in Parapsychology. A little bit unusual today. Our guest is U.G. Krishnamurti, and is a very wonderful book. I'm going to say it's a fabulous book. It's edited by Alvin Bobroff from the Divine Living Inc. It's called The Mystique of Enlightenment, and it is filled with lots of profound information. If you want to say wisdom, yeah. And as Yuji said, he has a lot of his own opinions, and it's his own ideology, and it's something that he has come to from this, what can I say, the process of Kundalini, or that biological thing that happened at 49 years of age, or that cosmic consciousness. Something happened that transformed him, and it's good. Now, I want to quote something that were written up in some of these Xerox copies, which are going to be able to tease you a little bit. Okay, making love is war. Cause and effect is the shibboleth of confused minds. Yoga and health foods destroy the body. The body and not the soul is immortal. There is no communism in Russia, no freedom in America, and no spirituality in India. Service to mankind is utter selfishness. Jesus was another misguided Jew, and the Buddha was a crackpot. Mutual terror, not love, will save mankind. Attending church and going to the bar for a drink are identical. There is nothing inside you but fear. Communication is impossible between human beings. God, love, happiness, the unconscious, death, reincarnation, and the soul are non-existent figments of our rich imagination. And Freud is the fraud of the 20th century, while J. Krishnamurti is its greatest phony. These were sort of allocated that you said these things. Now do you want to tear them apart?
I don't think I will deny any of those statements made there. But what do you want me to do?
I don't know.
I'm not denying, you see.
Before the program you said
I stand by that, you see, but you are quoting that quotation is there in the book, I'm sure.
Yeah. But the whole idea...
What do you want me to say? You want me to dilate upon that? What do you want me to say?
No.
Stands or false? Thank God I didn't say anything about Muhammad. Otherwise you and I wouldn't be here tomorrow.
Oh, I know.
Thank God I didn't
Alhamdulillah.
say anything about Muhammad.
That's
Not
good.
that I was frightened of Muhammad or any such thing. It didn't occur to me.
But they're pretty heavy. You know, any allocations, man, they're going to come and get you.
Yes. If you say that there is no freedom in America, I may not get my visa next time and have to take my next available flight out of this country. Who knows?
Is there any such thing as freedom?
No. What I have discovered, I don't know what word to use, what I have stumbled into, because it's not something which I have done anything to be where I am today, you see. And so I have to find some other word. I'm not worried. If I try to communicate whatever I'm trying to say, that's enough for me. Is that there is nothing to be free from. The very demand to be free from anything, including the demands, the bodily needs of the body, is not there. I don't give any opportunity for this body to feel hunger at any time. At regular intervals I throw some food to keep the body going, you see. I have no faith in what all these nutritionists are telling us, that You must have, you see, so much of protein, eat so much of protein, eat so much of vitamin, so much. You see, one lettuce leaf is enough for one full year to take care of the vitamin needs of this body. They may not agree. The
One
nutritionist
lettuce leaf is enough to take
care of the vitamin needs of this body. I don't eat vegetables. I don't eat fruits. I don't
Any meat?
observe. No, you see, unfortunately, I was born in a vegetarian family. So, and yet, you see, to call myself a vegetarian is a misnomer because I don't eat vegetables at all. I don't. Some carbohydrates. That's all that the body needs. And
What about that pint of cream that you drink every day?
yes, that is, see, I add a dash of coffee, you see, to make it edible, the cream. You see, the body, at least a half a pint of cream I drink. So I don't have any problems of, what do you call, cholesterol. You see, but I'm not going to recommend this to others. You see, my body has survived for 72 years on that kind of a food. I eat the same food day after day, day after day.
Doesn't it get boring?
Everything is boring if you want to, you see, put it that way, you see. You also eat basically the same thing day after day, day after day, you see. So the varieties of food is only for pleasure, you see, it's a pleasure movement. So when people, I make fun of those people who talk, you see, in favor of varieties of food. What is wrong with having varieties of girls, you see? Both are the same, you see. The society may condemn having varieties of girls for your fun, and encourage, you see, varieties of food as to show that you are an extraordinary lover of gourmet and all that kind of thing. The movement is, the pleasure movement is exactly the same.
So you're advocating promiscuous sex?
I'm not advocating nothing, you see.
Okay.
I'm not advocating nothing. I'm just putting both of them on the same level, you see. But the society in which we are functioning today may consider the one socially acceptable and the other not socially acceptable. You see, I am not in conflict with the society at all. It does not mean that I accept everything, you see, that is advocated, professed, forced on us by the society. You see, I am not in conflict. That's all. So when I say that God is irrelevant, I am not an atheist, I am not an agnostic, I am not going to tear down all the temples, churches, mosques, I am not going to burn all the libraries. I don't see any need for God. You see, that's all. You see, whether God exists or not is not my question. I don't even want to bother about that question or discuss the ontological, teleological proofs of the existence of God. That doesn't essentially, it is a schoolboy's stuff there. We studied theology, we studied philosophy, and all that kind of a thing. You see, they can do what they like in the university or in the churches.
What was the very beginning? What was the creation? What created it all?
It's one of the most unintelligent, I would say, impertinent questions that we should ask. Who created this universe? God, or the whole universe, or this world came out of hydrogen atoms and dust and some pebbles there, you see. So what value has that? You see, we leave it to the scientists to speculate about the origin of the universe in their own way, in their own funny way. But it doesn't in any way help us to understand anything except to feel that we are trying to discover the laws of nature. We know a lot more than our ancestors did, you see. And to talk of the creation of the world in 7 days is too absurd and ridiculous, because it can be proved beyond a shadow of doubt that how this planet, you see, came into existence by scientifically going into and finding out, you see, every stone, every planet, you see, every plant, every human being on this planet. You see, it has taken millions and millions of years. So there is no point in still talking about that the world was created in 7 days or 6 days, as the case may be, and on the 7th day he rested, and he created a problem for us all.
Well, I was just wondering who created the universe of universes and everything that manifests.
So the answers to all those questions can be found only when you come to grips with this fundamental question, how the thought is taking its birth there, that is when you are born. The thought in its nature cannot stay there long. So it is, whatever is born dies, you see. So we try, you see, to maintain the continuity by demanding the repetition of this thought to experience things over and over and over again. So it is the thought that has created the problem of cause and effect, you see, and then we try to establish the relationship between cause and effect and build tremendous structures of thought and tremendous structures of scientific investigation. So it is the aggressive mind, if I want to use this, put it in quote and unquote, that is interested in studying the laws of nature. For what? By understanding the laws of nature, we are not using them for the benefit of mankind. You see, majority of the people are suffering on this planet.
Why?
Why? Because of our possessiveness. You see, the thought in its very nature is a protective mechanism. It draws lines, it creates frontiers here. So naturally we create frontiers on this globe also. So there is no way that you can resolve this problem by trying to understand, you see, the laws of nature. You see, they will get the Nobel Prizes. And
but we need guideposts along the way, don't we?
Have they helped us? For centuries we have been depending upon the value system, and it is that has created the misery for man. So I'm not suggesting for a moment that you should throw this value system overboard, but that is false. Individually it is possible for you to realize by yourself and to find out that it is that is responsible for our life.
Yeah, but can we get all this information in one lifetime, as you say?
What are you going to do with this information except to feel superior to somebody else? You see, now, you see, the whole encyclopedia can be put on a small disc, you know that. So one of these days they are going to put something there in your brain which will tell you all about what man has thought, felt and experienced before for centuries. The totality of our knowledge can be put there in your brain, a small disc-like thing. So,
yes, but it took an evolution.
So what? Has it helped us in any way to make our lives happier and better?
Well, it depends.
We live in the hope somehow that we are going to be happy, that we are going to turn the whole thing into a paradise. And when? When? So we live in hope and die in hope.
Well, I don't think a magic wand came along and touched us and we just appeared, materialized on the surface.
There are no magic wands.
Isn't there?
That's what I'm saying. The magicians and all the spiritual teachers belong to the same category. And they con themselves, and at least the magician knows that he's very tricky. He's honest. But the teachers of mankind con themselves and con us all. And we are trying to play the same game.
But isn't there a plan of, say, incarnational or spiritual evolution or evolution itself?
I am questioning the very idea of evolution, let alone the spiritual evolution. Spiritual evolution is an extension of the same. And we talk of spiritual evolution because we assume that there is an entity there, that there is a center there, that there is an I there, that there is a self there, that there is a soul there, you see. So we have to find out for ourselves and by ourselves, is there any center there? Is there any I there? As far as I am concerned, the only I found and still find there is the first person singular pronoun.
The I that I am?
Yes, that's all, the first person singular pronoun. We have to use the first person singular pronoun and second person singular pronoun and third person for purposes of communication. See, you must have noticed that I'm very confused. I don't know when I say you, I'm lost.
You're not lost. You're watching Dimensions in Parapsychology. I'm Bryce Bond. My guest today is U.G. Krishnamurti. I want to correct something here. I mentioned the fact Divine Living, besides the editor of this book, Alvin Bobroff, he is really divine, but the name of the organization is called Dynamic Living, Inc. And at the end of the program, we'll give you the phone number, so have your pencils ready, because this is probably the only place you're going to be able to buy this book. Because as you heard Yuji say, he doesn't care if it's being sold, he doesn't care if you understand him or like what he has to say. He is what he is. Anyway, it's called The Mystic of Enlightenment. The Mystique of Enlightenment.
I correct that. It should have been mistake of enlightenment.
The mistake of enlightenment. Thank you, Eugene. That's wonderful. You catch it? See, folks? You see that lovely smile he's got on camera? Aha, we got him. We're going to freeze frame that and send out a lot of 8x10s on it.
Good. You're free to do whatever you want to do, sir.
Now, there is an enlightened man. This is my opinion, anyway. Okay, there's one more.
How can you have me as a guest on that program which you are talking about, you see, the new dimensions of parapsychology or whatever you want to do?
You're into consciousness. Even if it's what we call...
Supposing I say that there is no such thing as consciousness at all, except the knowledge that we have about things.
That would be okay by me.
There are no thoughts, and what is there is only about thoughts. And that the brain is not interested in memorizing all that stuff except to help this body to function smoothly. That's all its interest. But we have put that, you see, unfortunately, to use for which it is not intended. And I have always been emphasizing to whomsoever is, what's the word? I don't even get the right words. Whoever is interested in whatever I am saying, that the thoughts are not spontaneous, they are not self-generated at all. You know? So what is the thinking we are talking about? Do we use thoughts to think? No. It's a very mechanical process. What is there is an extraordinary computer. So let me see. You say, let me see. There is no thinking going on there. You will be surprised that it's the computer that is working out and coming out with, you see, a printout. You think that is the product of the thinking of a non-existing thinker. See, it is just nothing, whatever is in there, it comes out, you see. So you are activating this computer, and whatever is coming out of this computer is what is put in there. So if you ask some questions which have no relevance to this computer, it just stops there. It doesn't give any answers there.
So how can there be imagination if everything is already in the computer?
Imagination has no place there at all in the scheme of things.
Is there such a thing as imagination?
We assume that there is imagination, and I can't imagine anything other than what the senses report. So senses, you will be surprised, don't play any part in reporting anything. The translation of a particular sensation within the framework of the knowledge we have is what we think is the experience.
So we're going basically on memory from many past lifetimes?
And yes. No. You are crazy. No, you didn't get me. What is there you think will reincarnate?
I wanted to get a reaction. What is there to reincarnate?
You think you will reincarnate?
Experiences, lessons.
Experiences don't belong to you and to me. You see, there is a totality of knowledge passed on from generation to generation. And it is that knowledge that creates you and me for the sole main purpose of maintaining its continuity and its status quo. So there is no such thing as an individual at all. See, if you want to experience yourself, this body, which you call your body, is not possible without the use of that knowledge that is passed on to us.
And it's passed on from where?
You see, from my grandmother, she told me that this is my hand, these are my eyes, these are my teeth, show me your face. Every time, you see, a visitor visited my place, she said, tell me is your name, tell them your name. That is how, you see, it has become more and more complex, you see. We think in terms of, we don't think at all, sir. You may not accept what I am saying. There is no thinking at all.
Well, I'm going to have to, I'm really going to have to think about that. You know, if they get it all, I got to think about that one. I'm sure everyone in the audience is going to have to think about that one too. But why is it that some of these Indian gurus state that, you know, their reincarnational beliefs that we come back as animals or they go back to animals?
You and I are not going to be there to test the validity of the claims of those people.
Where are we going to be?
Who say that they are going to be somebody. See, who knows? How can we test the the authenticity of they are self-deluded people who want to delude us, you see.
Where do I go after here?
Are you here now?
I'm here now, but
You are saying that you have no way of experiencing the fact that you are here without the knowledge that is given to us. You see, the sensory activity does not tell you anything. This, you see, stimulus and response actually, factually is one unitary movement. There is no way you can separate the two and say that this is the response to a particular sensation that is out there. It is one unitary movement. So it is what we call thought, or the knowledge we have of things, that creates the space between the two and tells you that that is the stimulus and this is the response. So the sensory perceptions do not tell you anything about anything.
Have you died before?
You see, there is no such thing as death at all. You see,
It's an illusion.
It is an illusion, because there must be a birth for death. You see, we fix a point here and say that you were born on such and such a date, you see. But you can't tell yourself that you are dead on such and such a date, but somebody else, see, who watches that condition of your body, which is not functioning the way we are used to the functioning of the body, and say that it is dead, you see. So there must be 2 points. This point is fixed by thought. See, so you have no way. You see, although there are so many people who are trying to play all kinds of games with you and tell you that, you see, there is this experience of rebirthing, go back and back and back to your birth and experience your birth all over again. These are all just gimmicks, you see, that we are foolish enough to believe all that kind of things and indulge in such amusements and actually believe that you are experiencing your own birth all over again. But anything you experience now is the result of the totality of your experiences. You are projecting this mechanism back to the time when you were born and believe that you are going through your birth again. It is a funny little fantasy that we create for ourselves and experience and believe that you are actually experiencing your own birth again.
Well, let me ask you this. What happens when we leave this physical body in death?
To the body or to you?
To the body.
The body will be taken care of by others because it will stink.
Okay, and be buried. Now, what happens? What happens to
the vultures?
To the me?
Huh?
What can I call the
Me
me?
does not exist now. That's all that I'm saying. The you as
The consciousness or the mind. What?
The you as you know yourself and the you as you experience yourself is created by that knowledge. Every time you experience something, you are adding to that. Every time you tell yourself that you must be peaceful, that you must be this, that and the other, that you must not be this, that and the other, you are adding to the momentum of the totality of knowledge. One question which we do not know we don't have any answer for that question so far, is it also transmitted through the genes, the totality of man's experiences, man's knowledge, man's thoughts, or is it only the result of our cultural upbringing? I don't know, and I can't make any definitive statements, but one of these days probably they will find out that the genes also play a tremendous part in transmitting the knowledge that our ancestors acquired, you see. But in what way, I don't know. Now they say that it is not only the capacity to learn languages, but the capacity to learn a language is also controlled by the genes. I am not an expert in that field. That's what I am told by the experts who know what they are talking about. So what do we do? Do we have any freedom of action? Is there any the free will to do whatever you want to do?
If you had, say, 30 seconds to sum it all up, what would you tell the people in the audience right now?
Get lost. Go somewhere else.
Get lost and go somewhere else.
Yes.
Any
Try your luck somewhere else.
Such as where?
Whatever they are after. Anywhere they can go. I have nothing to offer them.
Eugene.
Nice meeting you. Goodbye.
You are very refreshing. I want to thank you very much for that.